Good morning to those of you in the Pacific and Mountain time zones, and good afternoon, everybody else. Welcome to this week's CSCE National Tech Talk webinar, CSCE Town Hall meeting with President Wade Zwicker. I'm Mike Bartlett, past chair of the Tech Talk Webinar Coordinating Committee. I'll be your host today. We have a busy hour planned. We'll start as usual with a quick introduction to the CSCE and introduce our presenter, CSCE President Wade Zwicker. Wade will give his presentation. We'll have a question and answer session and wrap things up in about an hour's time. CSCE has been around since 1887. Our mission is that we're a not-for-profit learned society created to develop and maintain high standards of civil engineering practice in Canada and to enhance the public image of the civil engineering profession. We have a number of technical areas that encompass the breadth of civil engineering. And so today's webinar isn't really on any of these specific areas, but as most of you know, we have active divisions and committees. And if you're interested in any of these areas, this is a nice way to get involved with knowledgeable people. We have a young professionals division, which is interested in supporting young professionals, particularly in their transition from being university students to being practicing professional civil engineers. And with that brief introduction, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Wade Zwicker. Wade cheerfully allows that he has at least 30 years consulting experience and has been a volunteer with CSCE for 40 years. And a pretty good volunteer for CSCE. He did win the James A. Vance Award a couple of years ago for his significant contributions to the society. So Wade, the floor is yours. I'll turn things over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Mike. Those that are on, welcome to everyone. I will try to minimize my ums and ahs as we go through. As Mike said, I've got over 30 years of practice and nearly 40 years of CSCE involvement. I am going to start this with a land acknowledgement. For over 15,000 years, Canada has been the sacred land of our Indigenous people. Reminders of this great history are in the names of the locales across the country that have Indigenous language origins: Okanagan, Athabasca, Winnipeg, Niagara, Ottawa, Oka, Shawinigan, Eskasoni, and Makatak. As immigrants from around the world, we embrace this meeting place of Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community and on this traditional territory. And just a point of note, the Canadian flag on the top left was designed and is allowed for CSCE permission, but not for profit. So today's objectives, I'm going to share with you some of the things that have been going on at CSCE. You know, what is CSCE, some of the challenges we've had, opportunities, and some of the things that we've been doing. And we're going to identify the value of national and local services, events, things that are attractive to the membership and the benefits of CSCE. So let's just start off with a little bit of history. The Canadian Society of Civil Engineers was established in 1887 as CSCE. And the term civil engineers was chosen to differentiate the society members from what was known as military engineers. And it was co-founded by Thomas Kiefer, the first president, Walter Shanley, who helped the incorporation and was the first vice president, Casimir Zowski, and John Kennedy, Henry Bovey. So there is a strong civil engineering past with this. Then the Society of Civil Engineers was transitioned to become the Engineering Institute of Canada, EIC, in 1918 to reflect the diversity of engineering that it represented. The goal was to represent all engineering branches, not just the civil side of things. And then starting in 1970, there were subgroups of EIC that wanted to incorporate their own identity. And that's when the new version of Canadian Society for Civil Engineering was established in 1972. EIC, just for information, EIC has 14 different societies under them. And obviously CSCE is just one of them. And as was mentioned by Mike's introduction, the mission of CSCE is, as a not-for-profit learned society, our mission is to develop and maintain high standards of civil engineering practice in Canada and to enhance the public image of the civil engineering profession. And what does this mean? We are not regulatory of the profession. We are not related to the Iron Ring. But what we are is a network of locations and disciplines. We're providing lifelong learning opportunities, career support, networking, chance to meet your national colleagues or international colleagues now that we have an international branches, etc. We're multidisciplinary. We are definitely volunteer driven, and members are the key. The CSCE does not exist for anybody but the members. We are member driven. So in 2020, at the terminus of Vision 2020, we had established the 2030 CSCE strategic directions. And as you can see, following the Vision 2020, it's the direction for the board. Anything we're doing, so we're not reinventing ourselves every year, we're going with a goal. And the goal is to growing the changing civil engineering community, promoting civil engineers to all, and leadership and sustainability practice for civil engineering. So what that kind of means, or what it does mean, is we want to promote equitable and inclusive initiatives. We want to look at equity, diversity, inclusion, or EDI for those that aren't know. Increase the representation of the diversity across CSCE, provide mentorship, increase across disciplinary collaborations. We want to be the learned society for the civil engineer. We want to provide opportunities to promote civil engineering to students, support the students as they're coming through, to the young professionals. We want to bring civil engineering to the masses. We have a history committee that is trying to bring out the information from the past, but there's also ongoing projects that we as civil engineers do not promote enough. And one of our directions is to try to get that out of the practicing engineer. We have a lot of educational based side of things, which is great on the theoretical, but we need to show how the theoretical and the practice work together. And that's what we are trying to promote through the education and research. We want to be an influence on how we do things. We have the President's Task Force on Accessibility that is looking at how we can make housing more adaptable for those in wheelchairs or that cannot get around very easily. We're looking at how that works for trains and planes and sidewalks and even the curb and gutters outside of the houses. So we are trying to be a voice and a lobby for a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that people just take for granted. And that's what civil engineering does. We're doing things like the infrastructure report card, Envision Canada, which I'll get into a little bit later, and sustainability, asset management. We're trying to provide guidance. There's a lot of things that CSE does that you may not be aware of, and we are bad at promoting ourselves. And if you've been on our website, you're aware that our website is a little lacking, and we are trying to address that. But as we move forward, as we promote ourselves, we need to toot our own horns and highlight the projects and the disappointments that have happened and then learn from those. For those that don't know, members, this is kind of our organization. We have a board of directors, and a subset of that is a national management committee. We have regional organizations. We've got 21 sections, one international, so that'd be 22. And we have 6 regions: the Atlantic, Quebec, Ontario, Prairie, Western, and International. And then we have technical divisions. Mike's slide earlier showed the variety of our disciplines that we try to support. We have the different programs, the asset management, the Envision, sustainability, young professionals, students, and how we try to support their activities and support things like the steel bridge and the concrete canoe. And then we've got other financial services that we do internally. We work on our history committee, honors and fellows, which is a very important recognition, and work on the professional development. Our governance, we have the president, myself, past president, president-elect, senior vice president, and honorary treasurer. They form the national management team. They are the ones that try to look after the administration along with the executive director. We have 9 vice presidents that you can see on the board, 1 for each region, the administration side, the divisions, and the programs. And there's actually 2 divisions and programs. They fall under the 1 category, but there are 2. And then we have 2 members at large, 1 representative from CGS and 1 as a non-voting that is working with our corporate members. And then we have the executive director. So in a review of 22, since I took the role of president in June at the last Whistler conference, these are sort of the things that have been happening in 22 and 23. So there might be some overlap with Brenda's term as well, but it's all been with the direction for CSCE. The financial plan, I'll talk about a little bit. The executive director, those that are in the know, we currently do not have an executive director, but I'll get into that in a minute. And then a bit of some operational updates as to what we've been doing and some of the activities that are happening. So in 21, we looked at our financial status. Where are we financially? How are we going to carry on for the next 10, 20, 30 years? And we had to do what's called a deep dive. We had to investigate, where is our money being spent? How are we going to control our spending, rein it in? We've had some declining revenues based on the conferences that we couldn't hold because of the COVID crisis. We've had staffing costs, we've had office costs, we've had banking costs, et cetera. And I'll show you that in a second. So some of the things we did, we worked on a moratorium on board travel. We are not paying for travel of any board members. With Teams and Zoom and other platforms, we can communicate quite nicely without the cost of airports and hotels. And then we're also looking at, if a technical division or a program wants to do an activity, we're making sure there's a plan as to how it's going to be funded and what is the benefit to the society. So those are things that should happen, and we're trying to look at how we can bring the society forward. This is a slide that was at the Whistler conference, the presentation by President McCabe, and it just shows in the past how our revenues were reported, where we were, our net income, and we were starting to find ourselves using our reserves, and where was that money going to? We had an executive director that left us in 2017. So we were at a period of about 5 years without an executive director. That should have saved us money, but some of our administration costs went up because of that. So unforeseen circumstances or consequences. The benefit in our revenues came from things like the short medium span bridge conference, but some of our lack of national annual conference in 2020 and 21, that reduced one of our sources of income. So we're trying to look at how we're going to deal with this downward pressure on the CSCE, and we had to stop that bleeding. We had to make sure that we are leaving the society in a better position for the next year, the next generation, if you would. Before I get into our financial kind of review, I thought I'd just touch on the executive director. So the executive director it's a paid position. It serves as a link between the policy decisions by the board and the implementation by the staff or the consulting side of things. The responsibility for managing the staff and daily activities of the organization, and the executive director is accountable to the board. And one of the other most really important thing is liaising with other societies or agencies outside, being our voice, our lobby. So in 2017 to 2021, we did not have an executive director. That was a decision that the board made as a direction to theoretically save money. And it was thought that the staff that we had would be able to deal with all the things going on, because we were supported by staff in the office and we had consultants doing some other stuff. And what we were finding is the board's role moved away from strategic oversight towards day-to-day management. And that's not really the role of the board. So that day-to-day management was distracting us. In 21, we had a temporary executive director. Temporary might not be the word, but he was hired to be go-between, and that was David Innes. So he became our executive director interim, and then the board at June of 21 decided that he was doing a good job in what we're doing, and we needed somebody in that role. So he was hired, but in mid-22, he indicated that he wanted to step down at the end of the year. He was retired. It was a lot of work, as those that may know, an executive director does a lot of work that needs to be done for the society. So once he had indicated he was going to leave, we formed a committee to do a search for an executive director, put out ads. We got a number of applications, well over 20. The committee to review brought it down to 6, and then decision to interview 3. Those interviews were held. From that, before that we made a decision, David had to step down for health reasons in October of 22. So we were actually without an executive director, and have been without an executive director since October of last year. The board has really stepped up to cover over a lot of the duties and responsibilities. That has been a great asset to me, giving the support of the board. And that led us into a financial review to decide how we could pay for the executive director and what it would cost us. So with those 3 candidates, we were ready to make a decision as to what we're going to do. And the finance committee had been working on a budget for 2023 and also a reflection for 2024, moving towards it. And this is the slide that has been out there. It should be in the annual report from last year. I think it was added as an addendum. And it shows that we are having an income of roughly $401,000. The way we are now reporting our net from the conferences and other activities, as opposed to all the money that comes in, all the money that goes out as income and costs. It's now reported as a net. So our society is roughly 400,000. And you can also see that we have a debt load of roughly $560,000. That 560 is supported through some GICs in the amount of, I believe, $400,000. So on our expense side, we want to pay back to the sections and regions. A certain percentage of all membership goes back to the sections and regions. We must carry board of directors insurance. We have some commercial insurance. The executive director, we don't have right now, so we're reflecting that, because it was decided that if you go to the bottom line, you can see $18,000 is our surplus without an executive director. So there is no way we could even entertain bringing on an executive director at this point in time. We have some administrative costs of $90,000. We have an Envision program manager. We have bookkeeping. One of the things we're looking at is the need for the financial audit. We have to do a financial review, without doubt. That has to happen. But do we need to go to an expense of an audited financial statement? So we are investigating that right now. And depending on the answers we get, we may be in the position that we can reduce that to save those costs. But there will still be some bookkeeping costs on that. We have office storage. Some of the things we've been able to do is we got rid of our office in Quebec, Montreal, just outside of Montreal. We were able to sublease it, so that cost has come off. We don't use that office. It's now virtual. So we've saved roughly $50,000 by doing that. We do have some travel expenses that have to be covered. We have a loan that we got from the government that we have to repay, and we're paying interest on our line of credit. So we are moving towards getting ourselves out of the hole and moving towards a true balanced book and repaying our debt. Just moving off that, I know there's going to be questions at the end, and we can go. But now we have some of the things that we've done this last year. We have created a new section in PEI thanks to the actions on the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic region, PEI was represented by the New Brunswick section, and now we have a section in PEI, so that's great. Last year, we supported a Northern BC section, so again, that's good. Our financial due diligence, we're continually working on how we are going to control our costs. We're bringing in policies and procedures, but those that may know, we were looking at introducing some new bylaws. We had sent it out for comments. We had a lot of questions, and we decided right now is not the time to revamp the bylaws. We need to get our house in order, and then we'll start looking at our bylaws. I think what's there is very likely what we're going to be bringing forward, but let's get the policies in place, let's get the procedures in place, and we will work on getting and communicating what the bylaws will do and what it means. Last year, there were more meetings of the board. I think that's important to make sure we've got that oversight. And there's been monthly meetings with the National Management Committee, which is a subset of the board. But decisions are being made. And if it's a board decision, we'll go for electronic votes or discussions, or we'll have a special meeting to do that. We are reinstituting the rebate program to sections and regions. I just mentioned that a minute ago. I think that's an important step. And with that, I'll acknowledge the financial support the sections and the regions are giving to national to help us get out of the hole. But we need a plan, a 10-year plan it might be, because we're not going to be able to do it in a day, how we're going to get ourselves back in the black and get the reserves built up that we had in the early 2000s and 2010s. So I think that's an important thing and a direction we need to go. We need to make sure that we are stable and solid. Some of the things that happened before, we have instituted one-up approvals on all financial commitments or non-financial commitments. We're ensuring that we have a two-signature approval on checks and payments. Anything that is going to commit the society has to be reviewed and approved by the board and signed by the president so that we have it proper that way. The honorary treasurer initiated and got the finance committee going, and that's a regular meeting with the sections and the regions, more so the regions, but definitely involving the sections and getting representation from them. We are looking for ways that we can get more revenue. That's been great. We had we always have our annual conference. Every 4 years, we've got the short and medium span bridge, which is a significant way of giving back to our members and making some revenue as well. The training programs for the short and medium span bridges. We have a training program in Ontario put on by the Ontario region for the Ontario government with McMaster University on sustainable infrastructure training program. That has been very successful, and that ties into our Envision program. We have the Canadian rights, I guess, to promote and train for Envision. This touches into that, but that's why we have an Envision representative, a paid salary that we are doing in order to promote that and also be a lobbyist. We think Envision, it's a framework. It's similar to LEAD, like LEAD is for buildings. This is the infrastructure equivalent. And all the things, the infrastructure is civil engineering. And if we can do the training for it, if we can do if funding for provinces was, it needs to be Envision supported, et cetera, that gives us the avenue for training. It's picked up in Ontario, and we're starting to see the need for that training across Canada. So I think this is a really important way of getting some revenue, getting that training, and showing the benefit of CSCE for the society, and not just the members, but for all of society. So like doctors fix diseases, civil engineers prevent it. So this is something that I really stand behind, and I support this wholeheartedly. From our student side of things, we know that we offer a free membership to all civil engineering students. That gives them the chance to, with the local sections, working with them, finding mentors, interacting with the professions in the region or the sections. We're looking to students to volunteer, and we have places for the students to volunteer. We need to work on that. We need to build our volunteers, not just students, but the young professionals and the practicing professionals. We have programs, we have competitions, we have the annual conference. So I think we can offer a lot to the students. I think we can offer a lot to the young professionals that are starting out their careers. And I think we can offer through our conferences, through our training program, whether it's Envision, whether it is the steel. We did have a UNB put on one on technology. We have had some initiatives in the regions for regional training, regional conferences, regional workshops, and we're only going to be working towards that. We're trying to promote that for all of our members and see if there's ways that, if there's something we're doing down east, is that something we can do down west? Can we cross-pollinate, if you would? You may have seen these pictures on the slides. These are all pictures that I have taken either across Canada or in Edmonton, but the CSCE is paving a path forward. And in order to do so, we need a good base. And I've been spending a lot of this last year working on that base, whether it is on the financial side, whether it is on getting the committees, the technical divisions, finances, getting everybody to start working towards not just being, hey, I'm doing this for the society, but actually doing it, not just talk. And I think that's an important thing that we need to do, is get the volunteers that are wanting to be involved and recruiting new volunteers. Hopefully you are seeing the conference countdown. Our next conference is May of 23. It's going to be in Moncton. I think it's going to be a great conference. We've got well over 500 papers that are being reviewed. There are a lot of programs, activity for spouses or companion programs. I think it's going to be a great time, and I really look forward to, if I get a chance, to meet everybody. So I think with this, I will turn this back over to Mike, and we can get into a Q&A session.
Thank you for a nice presentation, Wade. We do have some questions already in the Q&A. Please, if you want to ask Wade a question, he's promised he'll entertain any question, then please stick it in the Q&A. I'll start with the last thing, which is just a comment, which is thanks for your work, Wade. It sounds promising.
Thank you.
There are, perhaps not surprisingly, some money questions. One is, can you touch roughly on how many salaried staff we have for CSCE and the total salary cost?
Yes. We actually only have one paid employee right now, and that is the Envision program manager, Lorette. She is hired as our commitment to the licensing party, ISI, for Envision in Canada. If we did not have this role in there, we could very likely see our ability to control and work with them for Envision pulled. So we hired somebody. She is promoting Envision, and she is talking to the federal government, provincial governments, trying to find ways that we can get it in there, and working with the Ontario region on their training program and trying to get it going. The admin services, that is what we are paying a company called KarmaLink. And KarmaLink is dealing with things like membership. It's working on just dealing with our day-to-day banking, coordinating questions as they come in, working with our Honors and Fellows Committee to making sure we get all the paperwork. It's the role that we used to pay an office staff to do. It's now being done. And they're also working with the conference committees. So while it's in our second year working with them, I think they're doing a great job. And right now, since October, I will say that I've been wearing two hats, one as the executive director, making sure things are done. Fortunately, I've been able to assign tasks or get others to help out. So it's not just me. It is definitely the board that's stepped forward. But KarmaLink is the ones that we are working with on our computer systems, our websites. They're working with the bookkeepers. If we have questions for the lawyers, they're the ones that are chasing those things down to free us up from our day-to-day. So those are the ones. And then we're also paying, it's not just a 90,000 on administration services. We also have bookkeeping. MNP are doing our bookkeeping. They've spent last year quite a bit rebuilding our books. We had some computer issues where we lost files, so we had to recreate things. So that they sat down with all of our books last year, recreated the system, and got it all entered in. And then now moving forward, our bookkeeping should be a lot simpler, just entering in things and bringing things back. So that's a paid one. And then the financial audit. Right now, in our bylaws, it states that the honorary treasurer must bring forward an audited financial statement at the annual general meeting. We have been reviewing the need for that, who requires and what requirements do we have for an audited financial statement. And this is something that KarmaLink is looking into. Jean-Luc, our honorary treasurer, has been looking into it. Peter Langen, our VP of ACC. We've got a number of people looking into it. And we've been talking to MNP as well to see why. And it does not look like we need to, but we are confirming that before our steps, if we don't bring an audited financial statement forward, it doesn't follow the bylaws. So we'd have to do a minor amendment to the bylaws to change the wording that we would follow whatever is required and not simply say an audited financial statement. So those are what we're paying others for. Everything else, the things like the merchant fees, that's our ability to use credit cards. So we could say, okay, nobody can pay by credit card, everybody has to do checks, but that's a burden that we don't want to do. So we have to look at the costs. I think the credit card companies put on 2 to 3% on all credit card transactions that we have to cover. So that comes out of our overall revenues. Our website support, we have to revamp our entire website, and we have an IT committee that's looking into that. But that's going to cost money, or we find the volunteers to do that. And so we're working towards that. But we have to pay somebody to make sure our websites, whenever it crashes, whenever you can't pay something or get into an area, there has to be somebody that goes behind the scenes. So we do have that going on. Our rent, thank God we were able to get rid of our office commitment. We are still obliged if the subtenant, subleasee goes away, we are still ultimately responsible. But us not having to pay for it has really helped. As I said, it's roughly $50,000 a year that we're paying for a space that we weren't using. So that's come off the top. So with the surplus that we're looking at this year, it's marginal, but it's there. Now we can start looking at working down our debts and setting a plan forward on getting that down. So I went beyond just answering those two questions.
Thanks. One of the things we should say is that KarmaLink is also now supporting this Tech Talk webinar series by doing a lot of the back end work to make it all happen and taking load off the coordinating committee. There's a nice question here. Can you comment on our current membership and the current trend and what you're doing to try to presumably attract more members to CSCE, please?
Yeah, so since my involvement in the late 80s, CSCE membership has been declining. And depending on how you've been reporting it and everything else, one of the biggest problems we have is our management software of our membership is old and archaic. We brought it in and it didn't do what we're doing. So we are looking at new software to handle our membership. So that would be your emails, your addresses, your mailing addresses, and phone numbers and things like that, and making sure that if you paid, it's recorded and logging in, getting into other areas. So the membership, with its declining, I don't have a slide that shows it. This year, we're over 500 members. I would like to get that back into the thousands range. And the only way we're going to do that is by promoting. Everybody has commitments to money. Inflation's going up. COVID really made people pull back and start thinking about where the corporations are going to spend the money. Where is their money going to go to? Are we going to pay for memberships for their employees or not? And we have to show a value to it. And nobody is going to be a member if there's no value. So we are showing with Envision, we're throwing through our conferences, we need to get more practicing engineers involved in showcase their projects so we can exchange information and show what's going on. We need to improve our mentorship. We've got a number of things that we want to do. It's just how do we get it going? And for that, we're going to need some more volunteers. We got a great board, 20 people, give or take. Well, it's more than that. We have the sections, we have the regions. Each section region is doing things for their locality. Well, how can we tie in? We're having some difficulty in, say, the Prairie region. Well, next door is the Western region. If they're putting on a conference or a seminar or something like that, how can we make it work for more than just one area? So we're trying to show the value of CSCE outside of it. It's not just an academic. Academics is very important, don't get me wrong. That's how we get a lot of our ideas for the practicing side of things, exchanging the ideas, changing the way we're moving forward. But we need to get the examples of what the practicing engineer is doing that CSCE helps with, if that makes sense. Hopefully that does. I hope I answered that.
I think you did. Thank you. There's a couple of questions in the queue that are kind of related. One is there any interest in partnerships with other engineering organizations with common goals?
Yes, that is definite. We have been working with CGS, a member of their society is on our board. We're on their board. So we're exchanging ideas, and we are also trying to do seminars or webinars or others that are kind of crossing onto multiple different professions. Of the 14 technical and engineering societies in EIC include CGS, the geotechnical. It includes the Canadian Dam Association, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, senior engineers, electronics, tunneling, etc. These are all, you can find these all on their website and etc. So if there is something we're doing, tunneling, for example, is a civil engineering side of things. The geotechnical, it touches onto it. So if we're able to, and if we can cross promote, if we support, definitely we will do it. Sometimes we just need to be, hey, Wade or CSCE, are you aware that they're doing this? This is something that CSCE might be interested in. I can't be everywhere. And fortunately, we have a lot of board members across Canada, but they don't hear everything. So if there's an idea, just drop an email to CSCE. There's many different ideas that we can do.
Great. The one thing I'll just throw in, wearing my hat as chair of the CSCE National History Committee, is that we're now working with the History and Heritage Committee of the American Society for Civil Engineers and the panel on historical engineering works of the Institution of Civil Engineers in Great Britain. And we're doing regular webinars that are actually quite successful. I'm just going back to my questions here. What relationship coordination does CSCE have with any, if any, with the various provincial engineering groups in each province and territory?
Good question. I don't think we are strongly associated with any one, but I think that is something that we should be getting in front of. They govern what the practicing engineer does and follows. They must protect society, and that's what they do. We are more of an education, a training, ensuring the promotion of civil engineering. So while we both deal with this practicing engineer or the professional engineer, they're two different avenues, but I think we complement each other, and I think there is room for more interaction with them. And that is something that we definitely need to pursue. And that's what we might call on some of the past presidents in different provinces to help out with. Similarly, if we're going to run without an executive director for a period of time, we might look for a council of past presidents to help with the duties of what an executive director does.
Great, thanks. There are a couple of well wishes in the queue, but here's another question. Can CSCE provide paid professional development opportunities to the provinces?
We are working with Ontario right now for the sustainability training. So I think those are something that we can work with provinces to promote. Right now, it's just Ontario, but there has been interest in other areas to become members of this. I think, Mike, you can definitely add on to this. I think we used to have a strong training program. I say strong because I know we had it in the 90s, and we kind of went away because people were looking. There's so many different places that were offering different training, but I think we can definitely do some of that. Mike, add on.
Yeah, certainly there was a fair bit of educational opportunities for practicing engineers that were run by CSCE in the 90s and 2000s and stuff, and they have tended to fall back. I guess the CSCE does offer a couple of courses now that I think are mostly web-based, but yeah, there are possibilities there. Another question, do you see development opportunities with Indigenous groups across Canada?
There's Indian Northern Affairs Canada. There's other entities that are trying to work with the Indigenous groups. I think civil engineers are definitely the backbone of the support for the remote communities, and I guess by extension, the Indigenous communities, because it seems like a lot of those are remote. So we are definitely the people that would help with that if we can get through some of the bureaucracy. I think we have a lot to offer. I think we can help solve problems, but it has to be a government driven, because that's where a lot of the funding comes from. We are not out there for the jobs. A lot of the consulting engineers are. We can help with the training, the education, that awareness, but we've got to be careful. We are not the ones that are going to do the work, but we can do the training, we can do the education, we can do the opportunities. Our strategic directions 2030, that is where we're dealing with inclusivity, equity, diversity, mentorship, training, etc. So I think that's under our 2030 strategic directions. That is where it is. We just need to get the programs, the technical committees to identify and get the lobbying side of things and do the training.
Again, I can't help being the chair of the National History Committee. One of our recent initiatives is to create a small task group that's looking at Indigenous perspectives on Canadian civil engineering history, and particularly our historic sites. And so we celebrate historic sites for achievements in civil engineering, but sometimes they have side effects that are not particularly pleasant, and we think it's important that we bring those side effects out of the closet and let people at least know about them.
We are trying to get a committee going for the equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that is something we've been working on for this last year, and making sure that we're doing it right. Great.
The only other comments that I see in the question and answer queue are positive ones. I wish you luck, Wade. Thanks for serving the society, for still serving the society, says a former president. And great presentation. Exciting to see how we're adapting and changing moving forward. So thank you for those comments. Last chance to ask Wade a question.
And no, it's not the last chance. It's the last chance on this to do.
Last chance on this to do.
Always reach out with questions. We want to be as transparent as possible. We want people to ask the hard questions to make us look at ourselves and how we're running. There were hard questions on finances in the late teens and early 20s. That opened our eyes to a lot of things, so we're working towards it. I'm not afraid of the hard questions. And if people want to volunteer, just ask Wade, I want to volunteer. I like transportation. We can get you in touch and get the right people involved. So we're here always. We are here for the members. The members are not for the society. The society is for the members. I kind of coined the term one CSCE. That is, we're one. We're not separate. We're not managing. The members are at the top, but they're actually at the bottom too, because they feed up and they feed down.
Great. Okay, I think we'll pause there. I'm going to try sharing my screen again, and let's see if we can wind this up. So Wade, thanks very much for an excellent presentation and good answers to questions. Thanks everybody for attending and providing your questions. Wade mentioned corporate partners who are very important to CSCE. Here are the logos of some of CSCE's corporate partners. And here are the logos of the other CSCE corporate partners. So that's it. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good week. We look forward to seeing you at the webinar next week and see you then. Thanks. Bye for now.